Hey guys, so I am just taking a few minutes to go over postmodernism, as well as the text Two Kinds, and a little bit about Amy Tan, who is the writer of Two Kinds. So just to kind of start with, postmodernism, remember, is very, very much like modernism. So if you watched the last video about modernism, there was a little bit about postmodernism as well. So I just wanted to touch a little bit more specifically on postmodernism and the text we're reading in this section as we are rounding out our conversations about American literature. We've moved through Puritanism to start with, into revolutionary literature where we were establishing America, moving into Romanticism, Transcendentalism, and Dark Romanticism where we finally have an American voice. And then we kind of have the Civil War go down and people don't want that fluffy literature anymore, so we have realism develop. After realism, it kind of got a little crazy. So that's when we see modernism, and modernism, of course, transitions into postmodernism, or again, it's also known as contemporary literature. So when we're looking at postmodern literature, we are looking at the 1950s forward-ish, give or take. You can't be exact with these numbers just because, you know, things don't really have a stop and start date. They just develop over time. So if you think about the 1950s forward, that, you know, should at least narrow it down in history for you. We've already passed World War I and II. The Great Depression is over. You know, we're moving closer and closer to the 60s and 70s, into the next century, so the 2000s. And we're still kind of in this little movement, this postmodern or contemporary movement. They have a lot of similarities with modernism. There's still a focus on race, class, and gender issues. There's still focus on you know, kind of doing their own thing with literature. It's not as structured as it has been in the past. You know, there's still a lot of focus on lower class and lower class issues. But it also developed and talks a lot about technology, and not only the benefits of technology, but the dangers of relying too much on it, or what can happen if we, you know, don't use it properly. Which is kind of like the idea of dystopian literature. If you've ever read maybe something like The Giver, those are dystopian. They're not utopian, which means perfect. So they're kind of imperfect, not great. It seems great, but it's not. You're going to see a lot more dystopian type or more negative stories than positive. You're also going to see a lot more diversity of culture. So, for example, the text we're reading today, or this week, excuse me, is Two Kinds. It's by a lady named Amy Tan. She is the only writer so far that we've actually read that is still currently alive. Amy Tan is a daughter of a Chinese immigrant parents. She does live in California. She is 69 years old, I believe. This excerpt that we're reading, Two Kinds, is actually part of a larger novel called The Joy Luck Club. And her parents actually are part of this club. Some of the information in this text is real about her life, but other things are not factual. So this is more like realistic fiction. So kind of think back to our Kate Chopin short stories. This is more so that realistic fiction. So it could have happened, but it didn't quite happen that way. So in this text, I hope you're paying special attention to the title, as well as the fact that she is Chinese American, and this is the first non-black or white protagonist we've had. So we've had several writers who were African American or female. We've had several male writers who were, you know, black or obviously male. We've had a lot of mixing and matching of those things as well. And we're finally getting into a non-black and white issue of race and culture, and it's something you see throughout this postmodern movement. There's a lot of push to have all cultures represented and a lot of focus on diversity. And a lot of the text that I wanted to pull for this particular unit, or this section of our unit, were all by people who are non-white or non-black. So one of the other things I had looked at is maybe using a poem by Sherman Alexie. He is a Native American writer, very, very famous, and he's still alive as well. I want to say he's maybe in his 40s or 50s, but he's super famous, especially for a Native American writer. There's just not as many. There's another one. I almost pulled a short excerpt from, oh goodness, what is her name? Irrelevant at the time, but the text is by any other name, and it's talking about the struggles of people who are immigrants or people who live in colonized places and how they have to kind of give up their name for the ease of other people. And all of these texts have a very similar kind of issue where people are struggling with culture and their culture clashing with somebody else's idea of what their culture should be. And so I hope that you're noticing some of those issues that the character is having in Two Kinds, where she's dealing with issues of being a stereotypical Chinese daughter or not, whether she's dealing with internal struggles and she's dealing with her, issues with her mother, and she's dealing with just so many things. And that's why I think it's really important that we focus on conflict for this text, because there's so many and they're so important to the development of the text. They always push it forward and bring the next thing to light. So remember, the four basic types of conflict are person versus self, which is the only internal. The three external ones are person versus society, and person versus nature. So we see three of those four in there. In this excerpt, we see person versus self, person versus person, and person versus society. Those three pop up continuously throughout this excerpt. So kind of keep an eye out for those. Look out for those devices, guys. There are a lot of really easy ones to pick out in this text. Don't forget to find those and really utilize those in your analysis, because Amy Tan does actually have one of the most readable texts that we've looked at so far. It's just easy to read. This may be partially because it has dialogue. It may be partially because it has those short paragraphs, but there is a lot here that makes it really easy to read compared to many of the other things we have read. And it's the most current, so of course we're able to make a lot of connections that maybe we weren't able to make with other texts. Sorry guys, too still. And I just wanted to kind of let you know that this will be our last text for this unit, which means upcoming will be a, written version of a Socratic seminar. I still want you guys to throw some ideas out there and communicate with your classmates. We'll also be rounding into our next, our first test, as well as our next writing assignment, which is going to be a full essay, not just a paragraph here and there. So kind of just be in mind that those things are coming up. This is our last, second to last full week. So we have this week, all of next week, and then exams is the week after that. Remember that exams are March 10th and 11th. So just make sure that you are keeping an eye on your grades. Make sure that you are making sure all of your missing assignments are turned in. Make sure all of your current assignments are turned in. And if you have any questions, as always, please contact me. I'm here. I answer questions at all hours of the day and night, but I haven't been getting a lot of questions lately, and I've been seeing that a lot of you aren't turning things in, whether it's at all or on time. You gotta talk to me. There's only so much I could do for you. So be good, guys. Let me know if there's any questions.